How's it going, everybody? RazingHel here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Darwin Project. It's currently in early access, and it has recently gone free to play. Now, this is a game that somebody in my Discord, Rickety Split, suggested that I play. So I spent a few hours about a week ago just hashing out some matches here to see what it was like. You know, I played on some teams, I played solo, and just got a general idea of what we have to work with here. So for those uninitiated, the Darwin Project is a battle royale type of game that is set up north, where an impending ice age has given rise to a twisted new reality show in which 10 participants must fight to the death under the show director's gaze. As I mentioned before, the game is currently in early access, so some of this stuff is not complete yet, but it is most certainly playable at this point. So I'm just going to run over some of the highlights here before I actually jump into a match. So there is equipment, and this is a screen that allows you to customize your loadout, so to speak. So you have a couple of different weapons. The main weapons that you use in the game are a bow and your axe. And as you can see right here, you know, you can change the type of arrows that you go into the game with. If you use a standard arrow, you can jump into the game with that. You'll get 5 of them to start with, but it doesn't really have any special bonus to it. Whereas if you choose something like a fire arrow, the damage is increased, but you don't start with any. The berserk arrow gives you unlimited stamina for 10 seconds after you hit someone with it, but once again, you do not start with any. You have to craft them all. Same goes for tools. You have things like bear traps, smoke bombs, and gliders. You know, a whole bunch of different tools here. I'm not exactly sure why they call them tools. They seem more like traps. A lot of them do anyway, but that's what they're called here. They're called tools. I suppose things like a glider, which allow you to jump in the air, not exactly a trap. Then there are also powers. You can build these after acquiring electronics on the map. Electronics are one of those things that are spawned randomly on the map that players sort of compete over. And then lastly, you have these perks which can help you tailor your character towards your playstyle, because you can play as somebody who is going to be very aggressive. You can hang back and just hopefully let everybody else die. Either they can kill each other off, or the cold can kill them, right? And you can still win, right? You do not need to necessarily be very good at combat to be victorious in this game. And if you choose the right perks that go along with that, for example, these boots right here, you can choose speed boots, but do you want evader boots? This makes it easier for you to outrun people who are tracking you down and trying to get you. Or maybe you're a hunter and you're going to go after some people, so you want the hunter boots, so that way you can track longer when you are on someone's tail. So that's what that's about. Then of course there is the axe upgrade. Your axe is just a general tool that you use. You can chop trees with it, I suppose, or you can hit other players. So those are like the 2 weapons. There are not a whole lot of weapons in this game, which some might see as a downside, but at the same time it encourages you to think a little bit more strategically about what tools you use instead. For example, if you put down a bear trap before you engage in a fight, you might get your opponent to jump into it, and then you'll get like 2 or 3 free hits off on them before they can exit it. Just something to think about. So that is the equipment that you can change before you jump into a match for your character. There, of course, is also the dressing room, and this is where you get cosmetic items and you can adjust and tailor your character towards something you're interested in. It is also where I imagine the developers intend on making the most of their money off of, through cosmetics once again, which is a pretty standard business model for a free-to-play game like this. So that's the dressing room. The career just gives you your stats and what you've done so far. I haven't won any games, which I really don't believe is true, because I seem to because the season's over. Okay, that's right. What does it say for career? Yeah, the next reset happens in 2 days. So back when I did win a few times when I first started playing it, that season is now over with. And as you can see, I'm currently level 7, but I'll need to be level 10 before I can become a director. And the director is the one who can sort of manipulate the world in real time. And we'll get into that a little bit later. I think we covered most of the standard stuff here. The shop only has one thing right now. It's the supporters pack, if people are interested in giving back a little bit to the game, but apparently there's more stuff coming soon, probably when the game exits early access. And then fan gifts, this is where you get your packages that usually have cosmetics in them. So when it comes down to the actual meat of the game, here you can see we have 2 basic modes. One is a solo. This is 10 players in a free-for-all, or duo. This is 5 teams of 2 players. You really don't get many more options than that. And apparently the duo is currently in beta, but that was the one that I played for the most part with someone on Discord, which made it a lot more interesting, to be honest. But I'm just going to show you some footage here from several matches that I played in the Darwin Project, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the main objectives while playing the actual match, and hopefully overlay some relevant footage of that to help illustrate what I'm talking about. So the players all spawn onto a map that is composed of like 7 hexagons, one in the center and then 6 surrounding it. These hexagons are considered to be like play areas, and these are the things that the director will close after a certain amount of time. Now, the amount of time in which they will close is not determined, so you really can't plan around that in any sort of way. There are a few different types of resources on the map. You can collect wood, you can collect leather, and you can collect electronics. There are also some randomized gift packages that you can find other stuff in, but wood and leather are the 2 basic resources. And with wood and leather, you can craft things like your speed boots, you can make additional arrows, you need to craft a fire from time to time to prevent yourself from freezing to death. And then the director will usually spawn in the electronics, and the electronics is what most players are going to go after because they allow you to access some really cool and powerful powers, which things like invisibility or invincibility for a certain amount of time. You can get like a turret to help you shoot down other players. So the main resource contention is going to be over the electronics. But if you're not the type of player who's looking for combat, you probably will want to avoid those areas. From time to time, like I mentioned before, the director, which is somebody else in the game, I'm not exactly sure how the director works because this is something that I haven't unlocked yet. But apparently it's hosted by another player. From time to time, they'll be talking. I've had directors who do talk and are really engaging with the player base. I've had other directors who didn't seem to talk much at all. And one of the issues that I've found here is the fact that you can't really turn off the director without turning off all the other, or you can't really turn off the other players without turning off the director as well. I think you could use a few more options there. Another really big issue that I've seen with the director is they really don't give you a lot of information on how it works when you're first jumping into the game. It's not something that was immediately apparent to me, and then after the match that I played, they asked me to rate the director. And I was like, give me some context here. How do I give them a rating? What should I take into consideration for my previous match when rating the director? And I think that is one area that the developers of this game could communicate a lot better on, because at the moment it seems more likely that you'll just rate the director highly if you won and rate the director lowly if you lost terribly, right? So they need to move away from just a general rating for the director and come up with some actual characteristics. Do you think the director was fair? Did the director make things fun? You got to come up with some more specific character traits, I guess, to rate the director based on. So after you and the other players are running around the map, you'll encounter other players from time to time. You can track them down. If you see their footsteps, you'll be able to follow those footsteps because it will show up in the snow. You can see where they've recently crafted something, and you'll be able to track them based off of that. So that's how you can actually track down players and get into fights with them and stuff. If you're not somebody who wants to fight a lot, you can try to avoid the other players entirely. It might not work, it might work. If you are somebody who is good at combat, you will be a lot better off in this game. The game is, by the way, in third-person mode, so take that for what it's worth. I'm personally not very good at shooting arrows. I can hash one out pretty reasonably with the axes, with the melee weapons. But when it comes to shooting arrows, I have been repeatedly completely owned by these people who are clearly a lot better than me, and a lot of them have .tv in their name. So that gives you an idea of the type of players that the hardcore base is composed of. A lot of people who apparently are streaming on something like Twitch. So as time counts down, more and more areas are going to close, and this is going to help bring all the players together into one last hexagon. If you stay out too long in the other hexagons after they're closed, you'll die relatively fast, relatively quickly, because the cold just gets to you in an extreme way. So you will ultimately be all joining together in that one hexagon, and you're either going to have to kill each other off or wait for everyone else to do you the favor of killing them off and just stay as sneaky as possible. And the winner is pretty much whoever lasts the longest. It doesn't matter how many you've killed. It's a standard battle royale. The idea is just to survive. So in some ways, the game does encourage camping in that sense, right? Playing it safe and whatnot. But if you're good at fighting, you might as well go out there and fight, because it'll make the game a lot more interesting. And this is where one of what the developer side of the game's controversial aspects comes into play, and that is the show director. And they can show favor to some players and penalize other players in a certain way. And this is really based on the type of director you get. Some people are going to be better at it than others. I think there is the potential to be for some directors to be unfair, especially to, like, if they don't favor a certain play style, if they don't like the camping, if they find that boring, they will try to punish those players more. Like, they will send hunts after them, or they will close the tiles that those players are currently camping out on. So what is ultimately viable in the game can depend quite a bit on the type of director you have. And that can be a good thing and that can be a bad thing. It can make the game a little bit more interesting, but at the same time, it can make it a little bit less fair, I guess you could say, depending upon the playstyle you like and the kind of director you get. So I think that covers pretty much everything the Darwin Project is about. It is a fairly simple premise, and the execution of it is relatively straightforward. Since it is a multiplayer focused game, the livelihood of it really does depend on how many players they're able to get on to play at any given time. I personally have not had to wait too long for a match to start. Usually what will happen is when you select either free-for-all or duo, you jump into that mode and then they'll throw you into an arena to skirmish with other players to test out different skills and whatnot. And I would say the matches usually begin within 2 or 3 minutes. Most of the time it depends upon the time of day you're playing as well, because usually they'll try to pick a server that's close to your location. For me, the server that they were connecting me to was somewhere on the East Coast of the United States, but I don't know how well the server distribution is across the world. So if you live in something maybe like a less developed country, the options for you might not be quite as good. Maybe you won't be able to get a decent match without too much latency in it. I really can't speak to that. But that is Darwin Project. For me, the things I liked most about it, if I had to sum it up, are the choices of gear that you have when jumping in. You know your loadout, the ability to either sneak or stalk, as I put it, where you can either be the hunter or the hunted. Both of them are relatively viable playstyles. Being the hunter is obviously going to be more advantageous for you because it allows you to demonstrate your skill against other players. And I must admit, I've had some pretty tense moments fighting one-on-one, especially against other players. I don't like 2 versus 2 in general, because a lot of the time I see my team member there and I'll go after them from time to time and stuff, and it just completely messes me up. But one-on-one, I've had some very tense matches, some very tense 1v1 matches. That's interesting. And the ability to use traps. There was one time when I was fighting another player 1v1 in the free-for-all, and they used a trap quite excellently to snare me in place so they could get a few hits off of me and ultimately kill me. And of course it frustrated me at the time, but I could really appreciate them taking the time to put that trap down there just to catch me in it, because it was by no means a guaranteed thing. So overall, while I may not be very good at the game itself, I thought it was pretty fun, and I hope that gives you a better idea of what to expect from the Darwin Project. As I mentioned before, this game is in early access, and it is subject to change over time, so keep that in consideration. Thank you very much for watching as always, and I hope to see you next time.